Have you ever wondered why some women seem to carry the brilliance of their potential, like a hidden jewel, yet remain unseen, untouched, unmarried, or endlessly circling through relationships that collapse under the weight of their own patterns? The brutal truth is that most solitude is not the punishment of fate, nor the cruelty of men, but the mirror of one's own inner architecture. Every relationship is a stage upon which unconscious forces play their drama. And if you are still single, it is not merely because the world has conspired against you, it is because the world is reflecting back to you the archetypes you have not yet mastered, the shadows you have not yet faced, and the energies you project without even knowing. The first truth lies in the kingdom of standards. There is a hunger in the modern woman for the flawless man, the dream partner, the savior who fits every contour of her imagined ideals. She waits for him as if the gods themselves promised his arrival. But perfection is an illusion sculpted by ego and fantasy. Carl Jung once said that projection is the beginning of love. And yet, if a woman never retracts her projection, she will never love the man who truly stands before her. She will only chase her own reflection in him, then discard him once his human edges disturb the dream. When standards mutate into inflexibility, they no longer protect, they imprison. They isolate the feminine heart behind walls too high for any man to climb. You think you are defending your worth, but in truth, you may be defending your fear. The fear that intimacy will expose your vulnerabilities, your flaws, your unhealed wounds. So you demand a man who is perfect, while silently excusing your own imperfections. And in doing so, you turn away men who are not flawless, yet capable of extraordinary depth and loyalty. The tragedy is this. Good men are often overlooked, not because they lack substance, but because they fail to fit into the narrow portrait painted by unconscious fantasy. And so, the woman remains single, not because love does not exist, but because she has exiled it by demanding it look only one way. Then comes the silence of effort. Many women live in the myth that love must strike like lightning, that it is destined to simply arrive when the stars align. They wander through digital landscapes of dating apps, half-hearted swipes, conversations left to decay, convinced that someday the perfect man will knock upon the door of their apartment as though delivered by Providence. Yet the Stoics warned us, fortune favors the prepared, and the universe responds to action, not wishful passivity. If you never enter environments that invite connection, if you choose solitude as your habitual refuge, how will the masculine ever find you? Love is not a story whispered only in fate's ear. It is a practice, an effort, a willingness to move into the unknown. A woman who sits upon her throne yet never steps into the marketplace of souls cannot complain of her solitude. It is chosen. Every unopened door, every declined invitation, every refusal to risk is a decision to remain within the confines of aloneness. Yet even when effort is made, another shadow stalks quietly behind, emotional baggage. Past lovers leave their fingerprints on the heart, and for some women, the residue of betrayal, neglect, or abandonment stains every new encounter. Without conscious work, the psyche drags the corpse of old pain into present intimacy. Jung would call this the complex, knot of unconscious memory and emotion that hijacks behavior, turning openness into suspicion, tenderness into defense. When trust has been broken once, the wounded feminine often becomes the armored feminine. She wears her distrust like a crown, daring any man to break through. She speaks the language of independence, while secretly longing for devotion. She rejects before she can be rejected. And thus, relationships suffocate under the weight of invisible ghosts. To fear intimacy is to fear one's own vulnerability. And until that fear is faced, every potential partner is merely a canvas upon which the old wound bleeds itself again and again. Love cannot breathe in a fortress. The walls that keep danger out also keep affection from flowing in. Deeper still lies the challenge of self-awareness. Many women do not see themselves as others see them. They do not study their patterns with honest eyes. They wonder why the same story repeats, why the same type of man appears, why relationships collapse in eerily similar ways. Yet the answer is written within. The psyche repeats what it has not yet resolved. The shadow insists upon recognition, and until you turn toward it, it will return in the faces of your lovers. Without self-awareness, one may not notice how sarcasm wounds, how withdrawal pushes away, how constant testing drains connection. Without reflection, one may not admit that the standards they demand from others are standards they themselves have not yet reached. The woman who is not invested in her own growth but demands a man of vision, discipline, and self-mastery has entangled herself in a paradox. She seeks in him what she has not cultivated in herself. The ancient philosophers would remind us that the first empire to rule is the empire of the self. Master your impulses, refine your character, confront your shadow. Then love becomes not a desperate search, but a natural extension of your radiance. But often, the single woman is not without growth, but without balance. Her priorities, though noble, may have shifted against her own heart. She pours herself into her career, her ambitions, her independence, declaring that she does not need a man, while quietly longing for intimacy in the hidden chambers of her soul. She fills her calendar but not her heart. She invests in productivity while starving her capacity for connection. There is a subtle dishonesty in this posture. The woman says she wants love, yet she makes no room for it. She imagines companionship, but in practice she chooses the safety of solitude. Comfort becomes her cage. Change would require vulnerability, space, risk, and so she chooses to remain in control, even if control means being alone. Here, the archetype of the Stoic queen emerges, strong, capable, unbending. Yet in her unbending, she forgets that the feminine essence blossoms not in rigid control, but in the dance of openness, surrender, and connection. She has built her kingdom, but no one walks its halls. And beneath all of this, the energy she radiates speaks louder than words. Cynicism poisons the air around her. Bitterness twists her beauty into hardness. Constant complaints about dating, about men, about love itself, project a frequency that pushes potential partners away, for energy never lies. Desperation reeks as strongly as disinterest, and both repel. A woman attracts not what she desires, but what she embodies. When she embodies despair, she attracts men who confirm her despair. When she radiates hope, she draws those capable of hope. Every thought, every tone, every posture is a signal broadcast into the unconscious field of others. If you wonder why you are still single, consider the energy you project. Do you walk into the world with light in your chest, or with a shield already raised? Do you believe men are unworthy, shallow, weak? Then life will dutifully provide you with men who prove you right. And finally, there is the environment. No flower blooms in poisoned soil, and no love grows where there are no roots of connection. A woman who spends her time in circles where no aligned partners exist is like one who sows seeds in barren ground. Some women hide in the comfort of familiar networks, never expanding into new realms where love could emerge. And when nothing changes, they blame destiny rather than strategy. But the truth is merciless. If you want different results, you must enter different spaces. You must risk discomfort. You must adjust your approach when your current methods fail. For love is not only a matter of soul, it is also a matter of soil. The labyrinth of solitude does not end with unmet standards, half-hearted effort, or misaligned priorities. It deepens into the corridors of the unconscious, where shadow and projection whisper their truths. To remain single when the soul longs for union is rarely an accident. It is the inevitable outcome of unexamined dynamics that pulse beneath the surface. A woman may believe she is making conscious choices, but far more often, she is obeying unconscious scripts written long before she could name them. The psyche, in its relentless fidelity, repeats what is unresolved. A woman who grew up watching love twisted by neglect, betrayal, or absence will carry that script into adulthood like an invisible tattoo. Without conscious individuation, she becomes the carrier of her parents' unfinished stories, reenacting their dramas with new actors. She thinks she is choosing freely, yet she is driven by compulsion. The man who abandons her echoes the father who was emotionally absent. The man who betrays her mirrors the mother's heartbreak she once witnessed but never healed. Until she makes these shadows conscious, she will remain trapped, calling it bad luck when it is truly unfinished business. This is the essence of Jung's warning. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The single woman aching for connection may not yet realize she is in a silent covenant with her own shadow. She has bound herself not to men, but to the unconscious memories of love distorted. Yet liberation is possible, but only through the crucible of self-confrontation. Shadow work demands courage. The courage to look at the parts of oneself that sabotage intimacy. It means admitting that the bitterness carried from old relationships still poisons the well of the new. It means facing the jealousy, the pride, the fear of abandonment, the quiet disdain for vulnerability. These are not flaws to be hidden. They are archetypal energies begging to be transformed. And here lies another brutal truth. Many women cling to independence, not as a celebration of their sovereignty, but as a shield against their wounds. They mistake self-protection for empowerment. True empowerment, however, does not fear intimacy. It transcends it. It allows love to come and love to go without annihilating the self. It says, I am whole, and from that wholeness I choose to connect. But how many women dare to stand in that kind of wholeness? Most continue to project their unlived desires onto men. They demand that a partner provide what they have not cultivated within themselves: security, validation, a sense of worth. And in doing so, they create an imbalance, for no man can permanently carry the weight of a woman's unlived self. When he inevitably falters, she calls him weak, when in truth she has asked him to bear what only she can heal. The Stoics remind us that external things, partners, status, wealth, cannot define our peace. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If a woman's thoughts are soaked in fear, cynicism, and bitterness, then even in the presence of a loving man, she will sabotage the union. But if her thoughts are cultivated towards serenity, discipline, and gratitude, then love becomes not a desperate need but a sacred choice. Observe the woman who radiates bitterness. Her conversations drip with contempt for men. She mocks their failures, ridicules their attempts, declares them incapable of depth. And yet, within this contempt lies a confession. She has been wounded, and she has not yet forgiven. The masculine energy in her psyche remains unintegrated. She resists men because she resists the masculine within herself, the energy of discipline, protection, and assertive strength. Jung would say she has rejected her animus, leaving it to appear distorted in her external life. Contrast her with the woman who has integrated her shadows. She does not deny that men can fail, but she does not define herself by their failures. She has cultivated her own inner masculine, so she no longer begs a partner to supply it for her. She does not wait passively, nor does she chase desperately. She creates, she leads, she knows. And when love arrives, it is welcomed, not worshipped. The woman who remains single often struggles not because men have failed her, but because she has not yet reconciled her inner polarities. She craves the masculine outside of her because she has not awakened the masculine within. She projects her unmet potential outward, chasing it in partners, only to be disappointed when they mirror back her incompleteness. The path forward requires individuation, the integration of opposites, the union of shadow and light. Until she claims her inner strength, no outer man will feel strong enough. Until she softens into her own feminine essence, no outer man will feel safe enough. But society has misled many women. It tells them empowerment means hardening, competing, rejecting vulnerability, wielding cynicism like armor. Yet this is not empowerment. It is a masquerade of strength built on fear. True feminine power is not the denial of tenderness, but the mastery of it. It is the ability to be soft without being broken, to be open without being naive. And here the single woman must ask herself, do you truly want love, or do you only want control? For love requires surrender, the surrender of control, of certainty, of the carefully curated narrative of who you are. To open to love is to risk exposure, to allow another to see your unpolished self. And for many, this is more terrifying than solitude. Yet solitude too carries its lessons. In aloneness, a woman encounters her truest teacher, herself. She cannot distract herself with the noise of constant companionship. She must sit with her silence, her fears, her unmet longings. If she has the courage to face them, solitude becomes sacred ground, the soil of transformation. But if she uses it only as avoidance, it becomes a prison of stagnation. The brutal truth is this: many women are not single because men are unavailable, but because they themselves are unavailable. Unavailable to their shadows, unavailable to their vulnerability, unavailable to the kind of radical honesty that love requires. And so the cycle continues. She rejects men who do not meet her fantasy. She avoids effort, then laments her solitude. She carries her baggage into every encounter. She projects her unmet needs onto others. She radiates bitterness, and bitterness returns to her. She stays in environments where love cannot grow, then curses fate when it doesn't. But there is always a choice. The moment she turns inward, the narrative shifts. For the single state is not a curse, it is a mirror. And when the mirror is read, when the shadows are integrated, when the self is mastered, then love is no longer a desperate hunt, but a natural convergence. The woman who knows herself attracts without effort. The woman who confronts her shadow no longer fears rejection. The woman who integrates her inner masculine no longer depends on outer masculinity for survival. She becomes whole, and wholeness draws wholeness. Still, few dare to walk this path, for it requires fire. Fire to burn away illusions, fire to melt defenses, fire to illuminate what lies hidden. Yet only in this fire is the true woman forged. Not the woman shaped by wounds, but the woman reborn through them. The deeper one ventures into the psychology of why women remain single, the more it becomes clear. It is rarely about the absence of men, and almost always about the absence of inner clarity. The modern landscape of attraction has amplified this tension. Dating apps, endless options, and shallow interactions create the illusion of abundance. Yet beneath the surface lies profound scarcity. Scarcity of depth, scarcity of truth, scarcity of self-knowledge. When a woman clings to illusions, she remains untouched by real love. She confuses the temporary thrill of attention with the gravity of connection. She mistakes the dopamine spike of validation for intimacy, and in doing so, she feeds her ego while starving her soul. Jung would argue that this is the ego's trap, to seek affirmation without transformation. The woman remains single not because she is invisible, but because she is consumed by the wrong kind of visibility. Look closer at the archetype of the woman with unrealistic standards. On the surface, she believes she is protecting her value by demanding nothing less than excellence. But beneath, this perfectionism is a projection of her own unresolved fears. She demands from men what she secretly cannot give to herself: consistency, unconditional acceptance, safety. By creating an impossible standard, she ensures that no man will ever pass, and thus she remains untouched, safe from the risk of true intimacy. It is not empowerment, it is avoidance dressed as empowerment. And avoidance is the silent killer of connection. Avoidance does not scream. It whispers. It whispers excuses. There are no good men left. I don't have time for love. I'll focus on relationships later. Each whisper is a defense against vulnerability. Yet defenses have consequences. They build a wall so high that even love itself cannot scale it. Effort, too, cannot be bypassed. In the Stoic tradition, Epictetus reminded us that freedom is born not from avoidance of effort, but from mastery of it. A woman who invests nothing in cultivating her opportunities for connection cannot expect abundance. Love is not a lottery ticket. It is a practice. It requires intentionality, presence, and participation. But to participate in love, she must first strip away her baggage. And here lies one of the greatest obstacles. Emotional residue is sticky. It clings to the heart like smoke long after the fire is gone. The betrayed woman begins to suspect every man. The abandoned woman anticipates rejection even before it arrives. The heart that has been scarred fears tenderness, and so it becomes guarded. Yet love cannot thrive in guarded soil. Consider the woman who carries unresolved betrayal. She sits across from a new man, but instead of seeing him, she sees the echo of the one who hurt her. Every pause, every delayed text, every sign of distraction triggers suspicion. Without knowing it, she demands this new man prove himself against the ghosts of her past. But no living man can defeat a ghost. And so, the cycle repeats, leaving her more convinced than ever that love is doomed. This cycle is not fate, it is programming. Until she disrupts it, she will repeat it endlessly. Jungian shadow work insists that these cycles can only be broken by turning inward, by naming the wound, by grieving it fully, by withdrawing the projection of it onto others. This is not easy work. It is brutal, it is raw, and it requires the courage to bleed emotionally before one can finally heal. But without it, love will always slip through her grasp. And what of self-awareness? It is often the missing ingredient. Many women cannot see how they appear to others. They cannot see that their sharp tongue wounds more deeply than they realize, that their cool detachment is mistaken for disinterest, that their endless testing feels like rejection to those who try to love them. Self-awareness is the mirror most fear to look into, yet it is the very mirror that can set them free. The woman who refuses to examine her patterns will remain enslaved to them. She will attract the same type of partner again and again, not because the world is cruel, but because her psyche is stubborn. Until she sees herself with honest eyes, she will be unable to choose differently. And so she will keep asking why men disappoint her, without ever asking how she disappoints herself. To understand why the single state persists, one must confront the most uncomfortable truth of all. Many women unconsciously prefer the safety of solitude to the vulnerability of connection. It is not that they cannot find love, but that true intimacy threatens the fragile structures of ego and identity they have carefully built. To let someone in means to risk being seen, and to be seen means to risk rejection, disappointment, or betrayal, and for some that risk feels unbearable. Jung spoke of the shadow as the parts of ourselves we cannot or will not admit. In relationships, this shadow is often exposed in the most painful ways. The woman who prides herself on independence discovers her hidden desire to be cared for. The woman who boasts of emotional control finds herself undone by jealousy. The woman who declares she needs no one feels the crushing weight of loneliness at night. To embrace love is to embrace these shadows, yet many recoil, clinging instead to the narrative of self-sufficiency. But self-sufficiency without openness becomes sterile. It is the barren ground that yields no harvest. And so, the single woman convinces herself she is empowered, when in truth she is simply avoiding the mirror that love would hold before her. Love, after all, is the most ruthless of mirrors. It reveals not only your beauty but also your fear, your pride, your wounds. That is why it is avoided, not because love itself is scarce, but because its revelations are overwhelming. Consider how many women unconsciously choose partners who confirm their worst fears. She who fears abandonment chooses men who are unavailable. She who fears betrayal finds herself entangled with liars. She who fears insignificance attaches herself to men who ignore her. None of this is accidental. The psyche, driven by its unresolved complexes, seeks out situations that replay the old wound. It would rather suffer the familiar than risk the unknown. This repetition compulsion is brutal, yet it is also an invitation. It is the psyche's way of demanding resolution. Each failed relationship is not proof that love is impossible, but a summons to look inward. Until she does, she will remain single, not because she lacks opportunities, but because she has not yet answered the call of her own unconscious. The ancient Stoics would nod at this truth. Seneca wrote that no wind is favorable to the one who does not know to which port she sails. A woman without inner direction will drift from one disappointment to another, mistaking motion for progress. She may chase attention, flirtation, validation, but none of it will anchor her, for she has not charted the inner map. Without purpose, every connection collapses under the weight of confusion. And yet clarity does not come cheaply. It requires brutal honesty. It demands that a woman ask herself, what do I truly want? Do I crave partnership because I am ready to give, or because I am desperate to receive? Do I desire intimacy as a journey of growth, or as a balm to soothe my loneliness? These questions are not gentle. They cut to the bone, but only by asking them can she dismantle the illusions that keep her trapped. Many will avoid these questions. They will continue to speak of men as shallow, commitment-phobic, weak, but projection is at play here too. To call men weak is often to mask one's own fear of dependence. To label them shallow may conceal one's own avoidance of depth. The language used to condemn others often betrays the very wound that needs healing. The woman who truly awakens ceases to speak with bitterness. She does not waste energy declaring what is wrong with men. Instead, she cultivates herself until she becomes aligned with the kind of man she desires. She understands that the world mirrors her essence. If she radiates cynicism, she will meet cynics. If she radiates depth, she will meet depth. Energy is never wasted. It is always returned. This is why negative energy is so lethal. The bitterness of past wounds creates a fog that obscures new possibilities. The constant complaint about men being unworthy becomes a prophecy fulfilled. The more she insists on her disappointment, the more she invites experiences that justify it. It is not magic, it is psychology. People sense the weight of unresolved pain and withdraw from it, whether consciously or not. Yet transformation is possible in the smallest of shifts. When a woman shifts her energy from despair to openness, the world responds differently. When she enters a room with curiosity rather than suspicion, doors open. When she greets conversation with playfulness rather than defense, attraction blooms. The psyche radiates what it contains. Change the inner landscape, and the outer one cannot help but change in response. But none of this will matter if she continues to plant herself in the wrong soil. Too many women repeat the same mistake, staying in environments that cannot sustain love. They complain of loneliness while surrounding themselves with people who do not share their values, their vision, their hunger for depth. They confuse familiarity with safety, refusing to expand into new worlds. And in doing so, they starve their chances of love. The soil must be chosen with care. If she seeks ambition, she must dwell among the ambitious. If she seeks spirituality, she must walk where spiritual souls gather. If she seeks creativity, she must immerse herself in creative circles. To remain in barren soil and expect a harvest is not only naive, it is sabotage. Still, the greatest soil of all is the inner one. Without cultivating the self, even the most fertile external environment will yield nothing. A woman must first weed her inner garden, pulling out bitterness, planting awareness, watering discipline, and tending to her vulnerability. Only then can love grow in her presence, for love is not a random bloom but a reflection of the soil it grows in. So why are so many women still single? Because they have not yet dared to transform their soil. Because they cling to illusions of perfection, refuse the effort of vulnerability, carry their ghosts into the present, blind themselves to their patterns, fill their lives with everything but space for intimacy, radiate bitterness, and hide in barren fields. None of these are curses. They are choices. And choices can be changed. This is the hidden gift of solitude. It confronts a woman with the responsibility of her own becoming. No man can solve it for her. No relationship can bypass it. Until she transforms within, she will only recycle the same stories. But when she does transform, she no longer waits for love. She becomes the gravity that draws it. At the end of this long journey through solitude, projections and the silent contracts of the unconscious, the truth comes into focus. Being single is rarely about the outer world, and almost always about the inner one. Every failed connection, every repeated disappointment, every season of aloneness has been shaping, sculpting, preparing. But preparation without recognition becomes stagnation. The woman who is still single stands at a threshold. Either she awakens, or she repeats. The work of awakening requires fire. It requires looking at the parts of oneself that are easiest to deny. The craving for perfection that hides the fear of inadequacy. the avoidance of effort that conceals the fear of rejection, the bitterness that betrays the wound of betrayal, the obsession with independence that disguises the terror of true intimacy. These are not flaws, they are teachers. Each carries the seed of growth if faced directly. Jung would remind us that individuation is not about becoming perfect, but whole. To be whole is to integrate both strength and vulnerability. Light and shadow, masculine and feminine. The single woman who learns this discovers she does not need to chase men to complete her, nor does she need to harden herself against them. She becomes complete within herself, and from that completion, she chooses. The woman who has confronted her shadow no longer trembles at the thought of rejection. She knows rejection does not define her worth, it merely redirects her path. The woman who has made peace with her past no longer drags old wounds into new encounters. She lets men stand on their own, rather than making them answer for ghosts they never summoned. The woman who has cultivated self-awareness does not repeat old patterns unconsciously. She interrupts them with clarity. Such a woman radiates differently. She no longer clings to bitterness, nor does she exude desperation. She carries an energy of quiet certainty, of embodied worth. This energy is magnetic, not because it is manipulative, but because it is authentic. Men sense it instinctively. Here is a woman who is whole, who will not demand they complete her, who will not drown them in unresolved pain. Here is a woman they can respect, for she respects herself. This shift transforms everything. Love ceases to be a desperate search and becomes a natural resonance. Opportunities emerge not because the world has changed, but because she has. The law is simple, like attracts like. Wholeness attracts wholeness, depth attracts depth, bitterness attracts bitterness. Every relationship mirrors the state of the self. The Stoics spoke of freedom as mastery over one's own mind. Marcus Aurelius urged that we cease waiting for external events to determine our happiness, and instead recognize that peace is an internal state. The single woman who embodies this wisdom discovers that love, too, is not about chasing external salvation. It is about creating inner alignment so profound that when love appears, it amplifies her, not defines her. This is why the final stage of the journey is not desperation, but detachment. To detach does not mean to withdraw from love. It means to release the illusion that love must come to validate existence. It is the ability to say, if love comes, I welcome it. If it does not, I remain whole. In this state, she becomes free. No longer enslaved to the chase. No longer intoxicated by fantasy. No longer tormented by the absence of validation. She becomes sovereign. And sovereignty is the most magnetic state of all. It is the state in which love arrives not as a rescuer, but as a partner. It arrives not to fill an emptiness, but to celebrate an abundance. In this way, love transforms from a fragile transaction into a sacred union. Picture her now, the woman who has walked through fire, who has faced her illusions, who has integrated her shadows. She does not settle, nor does she chase. She does not complain, nor does she defend. She moves with grace, with discernment, with calm intensity. When she chooses a man, it is not from fear of loneliness, but from the overflow of her wholeness. When she releases a man, it is not from bitterness, but from clarity. She is no longer the woman who wonders endlessly why she is still single. She has understood that the answer was always within her. She has taken responsibility for her energy, her choices, her environment, her patterns, and in doing so, she has liberated herself from the cycle of disappointment. This is the rebirth. This is the moment the cage falls away and the horizon opens. No longer chasing, no longer begging, no longer hiding. A new chapter begins, not defined by scarcity, but by sovereignty. Not fueled by desperation, but by discernment. Not haunted by the past, but illuminated by the present. And in that illumination, a simple truth emerges. Love is never absent. It is always circling, always waiting for the soil to be ready. The question was never, why am I still single? The question was always, am I ready to receive without fear, to give without condition, to live without illusion? The woman who answers yes becomes untouchable. She becomes radiant, magnetic, free. She ceases to wait for love as a savior and begins to embody love as a state of being. And from that state, she does not chase, she chooses. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.